I don't know what reasoning model is sitting underneath it in terms of generating the text, the script of what it's saying. But I can tell you that I found myself responding to it in a way that was more visceral and emotional than ChatGPT.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode.
Hi, I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
And I'm Chris Saad. And on today's show, we're going to talk about NVIDIA's earnings report. They beat analysts' expectations, but the stock still fell. In fact, everything is falling thanks to Trump and his tariffs. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Microsoft and their Distillation service on Azure. Are they screwing OpenAI? How is the partnership going to survive? We talk about Alexa Plus, the all-new Alexa powered by generative AI. How are they going to kick ass in the AI game, despite not really having their own real, legit frontier model? We're going to talk about next generation voice models and how they sound eerily real, just like Samantha whispering in your ear. And then finally, we're going to talk about Anthropic and the new AI jobs report. Is your job the next one to get decimated by AI? You'll have to stay tuned to the end to find out. All that and much more on this week's show, straight after the break. Stay tuned.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. And it gets even better. Just for TSP listeners, you can get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
All right. For our first topic, we wanted to talk about the latest developments in the stock market, in particular, starting with NVIDIA, but then we want to talk about the broader developments going on. NVIDIA has done their earnings call, and they reported 78% year-over-year revenue increase to $39.3 billion, billion with a B, surpassing analyst expectations of $38.25 billion. Prior to the call, as I said, people were expecting about $38.25, which so clear beat. They've done an amazing job. They issued guidance for $43.0 billion, plus or minus 2%, which is also slightly above analyst predictions of $42 billion. Suffice it to say, they're doing very well. Shockingly, in a buy the rumor, sell the news moment, they're down. They're down an awful lot since the call. In this week, they're down 6.9%. I almost read out how much money I'm down. I won't do that right now. It's been a really volatile time generally for crypto and the stock market, especially today, at time of recording. A whole bunch of tariffs and stuff have gone into effect vis-a-vis Canada and Mexico, and the market is not responding well, despite Trump, trying to do a pump of crypto. I think yesterday, the day before, mentioning the crypto reserve again and mentioning certain cryptos by name. Nothing's doing very well right now. So, Yaniv, what do you make about the NVIDIA news, about the stock market in general, about the tariffs? How does it affect founders? How does it affect tech? And how does it affect AI?
Okay, so the NVIDIA news, I think the fact that stock price is down is not particularly interesting to me. It's still, at the time of recording, a $2.84 trillion company. Investors are weird, and basically it's not a beat unless you beat the beat, and it's just sort of weird. But I think the important thing to note is that NVIDIA is doing extremely well. And if you go back a few weeks, there was a lot of hype around this DeepSeek and this concern around the ability to train models really cheaply being something that might put a big dent in NVIDIA's business. And it feels like we've kind of moved on from that. NVIDIA is still massively oversubscribed in the sense that they can sell every chip they can manufacture. They've got a long waiting list and so on. Since DeepSeek, we've had Claude 3.7 launched, GPT 4.5, and so it actually does not feel like that brief period of doom around the need for GPUs has come to pass. So NVIDIA is doing as well as ever. And, I think, not that it was a particularly original thought, but we should take a little bit of a victory lap on this to say, really, when something gets cheaper, like training models, then you just end up doing more of it. It doesn't actually collapse demand as long as the actual output is useful. And so we're still thinking AI is useful and is going to get a whole lot more useful, and NVIDIA will do fine unless they actually fall behind their competition, which I think there are some interesting threats coming now, but so far they are the clear market leader, and that doesn't seem to be going away. So that's sort of on NVIDIA more specifically. Now, the stock market broadly, it's not surprising that as Trump plays games with tariffs and its allies, that stock market is going to be thinking, maybe this isn't so great for the economy after all. We all have a memory of Donald Trump making a lot of big, loud threats. We're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it and so on, and not really following through. And so I think anything that is announced, for example, a global trade war, is discounted by the markets to a fairly large degree as saying it could happen, but it probably won't. It will probably be resolved. Even the latest tariffs, Chris, which I think went into effect yesterday on Canada and Mexico, apparently are about to be lifted again, or there are rumors of that happening. So I think people are feeling still that although Trump is definitely destabilizing the economy and that justifies pulling back stock prices a bit, he's probably still not actually going to tear down the whole economy. I'm not sure I totally agree with that outcome. I think Trump 2.0 is very different from Trump 1.0, but I think that is where the stock market is at. And you could similarly say that is the situation with crypto, right? Where Trump has made an announcement, well, not even an announcement, he's sort of blustered about creating a crypto reserve, right? But he hasn't actually created one. There are no details. And so I think what's happened is when Trump was elected, crypto went way up on the assumption that this national reserve would be created. I actually think what's happening in the crypto markets is people are thinking maybe he's full of shit after all on this, and there won't be a national strategic crypto reserve.
Yeah, the fact that the stock market is extremely volatile under Trump is not what surprises me. What surprises me was the pure euphoric optimism that occurred after he won the election.
It's bizarre.
That's what surprised me, is like, that is the cliche is the market likes stability, political stability. And yet we all know that Trump is a chaos monkey, and everything was like just jumped up 20%. And it's just like, what? This is fucking stupid. So this is not surprising to me at all. As you said, a lot of these things possibly won't come to pass, but the amount of collateral damage and uncertainty and confusion along the way is going to create real rifts and destabilizing, long-lasting effects. I think the DeepSeek fear is not over. The little that I watch MSNBC or what have you, they bring it up on the regular. They're still trying to figure out, like, what does this really mean to NVIDIA? They every single time they talk about NVIDIA, they talk about DeepSeek, and they're very concerned about the threat of a DeepSeek, the DeepSeek moment. And so the kind of the general dumb money equation is like, we're not really sure where this all nets out. I think, Sam Altman's gone on and on to reiterate, hey, it's only going to take more compute to train, to do inference, and to run these things. And we're only going to need more tokens, not less. That's that. And then at the end of the day with NVIDIA, I'm very, very bullish on NVIDIA. I think to look at NVIDIA as a pure, like, training AI play is missing the forest for the trees. Their businesses in general cloud computing, in robotics, in autonomous vehicles, in Omniverse, in digital twins. Their gaming business is quite small now, but they've still got that. Crypto, blockchain, scientific research. I mean, these guys have a lot of very, very interesting bets on some of the most interesting trends developing today. And, I just wouldn't bet against Jensen Huang. And, I think there's a lot more to play out here.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against him. I would say I'm not like pure bullish in the sense that what I don't think is a concern is DeepSeek and that sort of thing. What I do think is a concern is actual competition, especially in inference, right? So I think you're saying, NVIDIA's got the best GPUs, and GPUs can be used for a lot of things.
Not just GPUs, technology stacks, suites of computer systems.
Yeah.
And also in investments and ecosystems around robotics and self-driving cars and all this stuff. I think it's a real mistake to think of, as them as a one-trick pony. And I think their competition is a little bit overstated, and nothing that they can't copy or buy or innovate through.
Look, I half agree. Like, I think they're a one-trick pony in the same way that Google was always accused of being a one-trick pony, where it's like Google makes nearly all of its money from search ads. And that's always been true. But the amount of ecosystem it created around it to make sure that it continued to dominate in search ads was really a lot of tricks that added up to that one trick. And I think you're right with NVIDIA. If you miss CUDA and all of this stuff that create a kind of GPU hegemony, you're missing a trick. Nonetheless, ultimately, where they make the money is selling chips, right? And so yes and no. But, what I was going to say is I listened to a podcast with the founder of Groq, Groq with a Q, which is an inference chip startup. We actually discussed them when they came out of stealth last year on this podcast.
We also discussed their competitor, Positron, who
That's right.
is made up of broadly former Groq engineers, and they're kicking ass, actually.
Right. And in both the case of Groq and Positron, of course, talking their own book, what they're saying is that GPUs were a very clever hack, that in the sense that CPUs were not good for machine learning, GPUs were a lot better for machine learning, and so they've become quite dominant. Nonetheless, GPUs, the hint is in the name, they're called graphics processing units. They were not designed as an architecture specifically with these use cases in mind. And so what they are saying is the next generation, especially for inference, is a quite different architecture to the GPU. And that's what Groq are doing. That's what Positron are doing. That's also what Google are doing with the tensor processing unit. It's a different architecture. And I think that is where NVIDIA is at more risk, right? Because whenever there is a paradigm shift, and going from a GPU to a completely different architecture is absolutely a paradigm shift in chips, that's where the disruption can occur. So if I were to be betting against NVIDIA, that's the grounds on which I would be betting against them, not, DeepSeek means training is cheaper.
Yeah, interesting. If you go back and watch our Spotlight episode with Positron, the CEO and founder there, really young guy, and his team is mostly former Groq. They left Groq the moment sort of GPT, that moment occurred, exactly for the same reason. So Groq was actually created pre-GPT and was actually designed as an architecture not specifically for inference. And they're throwing, apparently, this is the Positron book, crap loads of memory and crap loads of their Groq processors at the problem in order to get those token speeds. And the argument that the Positron team is making is, no, this is actually built post-GPT specifically for inference time compute. And they not only can spit out tokens faster, but way more efficiently with fewer processes. So go back and watch that thing. I'm not saying I believe them or I'm advocating either way. I'm just saying these are the arguments from those teams, and I think neither you nor I are never technical enough to debate it one way or the other. But it's an interesting debate, interesting battle emerging there. I do think, though, NVIDIA is not asleep at the wheel, right?
No, of course not.
I'm sure they've got inference time compute, processes coming and blah, blah, blah. All right, those are our thoughts on NVIDIA, the stock market, and crypto, and how Trump is affecting all that. What do you guys think? Join us in the comments. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll join you down there. So related to this, related to the DeepSeek question, is something I wanted to talk about, which is that Satya and Microsoft recently announced that Microsoft is now got ChatGPT 4.5 available on Azure. And it's, they mentioned all of the great features of why you should go use the model on Azure. And one of the features was distillation support, which I thought was really, really interesting. So let's take a giant step back. One of the ways that DeepSeek was possible, DeepSeek, if you remember, was a much cheaper model out of China using older GPUs, and they claim using a fraction of the money. Now, I think that's since been relatively disproven. To buy the GPUs alone is a lot of money. But it was done for a fraction of the overall money that an OpenAI, for example, is spending on generating these models from scratch. And the way they did that, amongst a few innovations and architecture differences, was to distill OpenAI's ChatGPT, by saying, think of it as using ChatGPT as like a big brother or as a teacher to teach the smaller, cheaper model. And so ChatGPT was used to feed it information, to feed it weights in a way, to feed it data so that it can train on ChatGPT. And this is much more cost effective, and it's a little bit of like I don't know if you'd call it a hack, a cheat. It's certainly a way of leveraging the existing investment that OpenAI has made. Now, my comments at the time was, well, OpenAI is going to keep running uphill, keep developing more sophisticated models, and they're probably going to find a way to try to minimize or mitigate this distillation thing, this ability to basically rip them off. And I thought, they're going to get a bit more sophisticated about this and make it harder for the next Chinese model to steal their model. No, Microsoft, on the contrary, are saying, "Hey, go use ChatGPT 4.5 on Azure, and we will help you do distillation." It's one of the features, and that I thought was a really interesting move on Microsoft's part, and an interesting, I think, a piece of daylight between Microsoft's incentives, which is drive Azure, usage, workloads on Azure, versus OpenAI's business model and incentives, which is we need to protect the proprietary investments we're making and monetize these things ourselves. What do you think, Yanev?
Ever since the dawn of computing, right, we've tried to find more efficient ways of representing data, of representing instructions, and so on. So, it's got a fancy new name, distillation, but there's nothing new here. It's about taking a big model and creating a smaller model that has very similar capabilities. This is just obviously a good thing to do. Everyone should be doing it, including the big guys themselves, and no doubt they are. I'm sure OpenAI are distilling. I'm sure Gemini are distilling. What Microsoft are probably thinking is that once the genie is out of the bottle, it's out of the bottle. As with AI itself, as with cryptography, as with any number of things, if the technology exists in the world, people are going to use it. There's no point trying to control technology any more than there is trying to slow down the progress on AI. If you remember, there were movements, just a year or two ago saying you really need to slow down on AI development. And let's see, we can see how well it's turned out. It's just not the way competition works. And so Microsoft really, in a sense, have no choice. If distillation tech is out there, they want to make sure that the distillation happens on their platform rather than on somebody else's platform. Ignoring the fact that tech exists doesn't mean it's going to stop existing. So it's a completely logical step on their part. Are there tensions behind the scenes between Microsoft and their partner OpenAI? One could speculate there are. I don't have any actual evidence of that. But yeah, distillation is out there. You can assume it's going to happen. Might as well do it on our platform, right?
Yeah, I do think it's fascinating to think about those possible tensions, because Satya, I think, famously said during the big OpenAI skerfuffles of Sam Altman being fired and all this sort of stuff, he said, we're below them, we're above them, we're beside them. Basically, we own them. We are completely safe. The deal has tons of built-in protections. We don't need no stinking OpenAI, is what he was trying to say. Partly to give shareholders a sense of confidence that Microsoft will be okay, irrespective of what OpenAI does, but partly because that's the truth. The truth is they have access to these models and they can host them, run them, and do whatever the hell they want with them. I can just imagine the degree of consternation at OpenAI are going like, "Hey, we kind of prefer you don't let people distill our extremely expensive proprietary API models through your cloud service." That feels a little bit antithetical to the business model we're trying to build over here. And I would just give anything to be a fly on the wall during those conversations. Sam's famously talked about how amazing the deal is and how it's the best, partnership in tech history. He has admitted, it's not a perfect deal with perfect alignment, but it's good, it's fantastic. And I do think, just reading the tea leaves, that this is one of those areas where you can see a little bit of misalignment of incentives.
Well, it's funny. You were talking about NVIDIA before, and are we bullish on it? Are we bearish? The company I would be most inclined to be bearish on out of these big players is OpenAI. We've discussed this before. They have historically had the best technology. They arguably still do, but it's becoming more arguable. In the meantime, they have weak distribution, right? The only way that you get OpenAI is by going to OpenAI directly. And now they are by far the market leader. But you can see that folks like Google, like Microsoft, they have the distribution rails built in to their platforms, right? And so they can kind of chip away over time, push more and more people over to Gemini, over to, whatever it is that they use. And OpenAI kind of there on their own without those distribution rails. And so to me, their business model only makes sense if they are the first to achieve artificial general intelligence, at which point all bets are off. And I think that's why Sam talks about it so much, because when you're in the world of trench warfare, where you're really just selling to customers saying like, my AI model's the best, and someone else says, no, my AI model's the best. And however, Google gets to bundle it with their services. Microsoft gets to put it straight into their cloud. Well, what does OpenAI have? Not so much. And so they need to be racing straight towards a singularity where the existing laws of economics are kind of upended anyway, and we enter a new world. If they don't pull that off, and if they don't get there first, I could see that they're pretty screwed, because they're sure as hell burning a lot of cash.
Okay, those are our thoughts on Microsoft and OpenAI's partnership and perhaps some misalignment they have there with Distillation. What do you guys think? Are they maybe arguing in the background, or is it all kumbaya? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll join you there. That brings us very neatly to our third topic, Yaniv, which is Alexa Plus from Amazon. You talked about the distribution advantage. Many times on the Reacts episodes, we've talked about this distribution advantage and about how, for example, you mentioned OpenAI is the market leader. Well, actually, by volume, up until recently, I think Meta was the leader in terms of AI usage because they have their Meta AI baked into Messenger and WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram, and so they have a massive distribution advantage. And now here comes Amazon with Alexa Plus. They've announced that they're working on glasses and on earbuds, on an app, and of course, all of their Echo devices are getting updated with the new generative AI-powered Alexa. And it is pre-baked into, if not the devices themselves, at least the management layer of things like Ring cameras, right? And so you can literally go and ask Alexa, hey, have I had a package delivered in the last 12, 24 hours? And they can go, yes, I detected a package was delivered at 3 p.m. by, someone that looks like an Amazon delivery guy. And you can do these complex things like I have friends coming over. I want you to play some chill music and make the lights blue and lock the doors or unlock the doors. They're essentially first to market with this. Siri is a piece of shit. It's garbage. It's just pure garbage. Google Gemini is sort of being baked into Google Home a little bit, kind of, sort of. They're trying to figure out the integration between Assistant and Gemini. As far as I can tell, and I haven't used it yet, but Echo and Alexa are the first to announce, much less implement, a full-throated, unified strategy for generative AI as a personal assistant in your home. It's exciting as we all imagined it to be. And I believe they claimed that this will be the largest deployment of generative AI, period, at least as of their announcement date. And I believe them. This is consumer grade personal assistant in the home. The form factor, the distribution, and the use cases are just really exciting. And I can't wait to have my own Jarvis running my house.
We don't hear much about Amazon in the AI race. My suspicion is that their foundation models, their actual research abilities are below those of people like Facebook, like Google, definitely like OpenAI, like Anthropic. They're sort of in the second tier there. So I don't know what that means, right? It still feels to me that Google is in the box seat in terms of having the distribution combined with having the internal expertise. Their main challenge is to not keep tripping over their own feet because organizationally they're a little bit of a basket case. However, they still have the best tech and the best distribution for AI. And for example, I mentioned this a few episodes ago, those Google AI summaries at the top of search results, they were an annoying joke 3 or 4 months ago. Now they're really good. I mostly rely on them. So, they do have that ability to screw up again and again, and it's still theirs for the taking. Now, Amazon is an interesting player. They are better at execution. The Alexa ecosystem does seem more bedded in than the Google Home ecosystem. My question is their AI good enough? It's interesting. Just to go back to what I was saying before about OpenAI and, AGI and the singularity, we have this interesting situation where we have nearly 2 parallel bases of competition, right? You've got your everyday, we're just making a better model and competing on price and competing on distribution, very much like classic business school MBA stuff, right? We just have a very competitive market. And there, Amazon is really well placed. And then you've got who's going to achieve artificial superintelligence first and take over the world and, move us towards a singularity. That's a different game. Now, these games are correlated, right? Someone like Google or someone like OpenAI is trying to play both games at once. I don't think Amazon is in the game to win the AGI race, but they are in the game to win the old-fashioned distribution. We're just going to use AI to make our product so much better race. I think this could further cement Amazon's hegemony. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, there's a saying that says first-time founders chase product, second-time founders chase distribution. The name of the game is distribution. It really is. So Amazon's Alexa strategy, as far as I can tell, is being run by this guy called Panos Panay, who was running Microsoft's Surface strategy. And I think Microsoft's Surface strategy, as far as Microsoft hardware has ever been, it was excellent, just
Yep.
excellent.
Yep.
It took Microsoft from being a joke in the hardware game to being absolutely competitive, to setting the benchmark for what a great Microsoft device should look like. And he's now over at Amazon. As far as I can tell, this is his first major announcement there. And he did an absolutely fantastic job. And yeah, they're saying straight up, we don't care what the fucking model is. We just don't care. We have a community of models. We choose the right model for the job. We have Amazon Bedrock and Amazon whatever. They have a little open source model of their own, and we just choose whatever the right model is. We don't care.
Yeah.
And Amazon, we've talked about this on the show as well, Yanev. Each of these companies sees the world through a certain lens, right? And Amazon sees the world through commerce. That's the lens they look at everything, right? Facebook looks at the world, or Meta looks at the world as everything through social, and Apple through humanities or hardware, and Microsoft through enterprise. Those are their biases.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think Amazon gives a shit. They just want to sell you shoes, books, or tokens, or compute cycles.
Yeah.
Just come and transact. We don't care.
That's right.
And if we need to put a device in your home for you to transact more, we will just do that. And that's the name of the game.
I think that's exactly right. And so really what you're saying, and I agree with this, is Amazon are not in the AI game. Amazon are doing what we talk about product companies, what a lot of product companies, a lot of startups, listeners, should be doing, which is not thinking of yourself as an AI company. Think of yourself as doing whatever it is that you are doing and thinking about how you can leverage this incredibly powerful new tool to do it better. And that's just what Amazon's saying. It's like, Alexa, how do we make Alexa better with AI? This is how we make it better. They're not thinking we're an AI company. And so you're absolutely right, Chris. They're not really in that AI game. They are in the commerce game, and they're just continuing to do it really well with whatever tools are at their disposal. Is Amazon the secret dark horse in the AI race? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, Flow Health, and Quora all use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Why aren't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
For our fourth topic, all these are kind of have nice little bridges or interrelationships between them. I wanted to talk about the new voice model from Sesame. This thing blew my mind. So let's take a step back. If you remember back to the old Siri days, there was the old, let's say, the Mac synthesizer voice, if we remember that way back in the day. Steve Jobs is on stage and he got it to say hello, and everybody lost their mind. And then there was, a few generations there, and then there's the Siri voice, and the Siri voice got a little bit better, and then there's the Google voice, and the voices have just gotten more and more natural. And every time we hear a new version, it's like, oh my God, this sounds like a human. And then there's another one that comes out, and you're like, no, this one sounds like a human. And the last time I had that moment was listening to the new advanced voice mode from OpenAI, where she literally sounded like Samantha. She sounded like Scarlett Johansson. In fact, she sounded so much like Scarlett Johansson sued them. Now, there's a new voice from a company called sesame.com. There's a demo you can go check out. We'll put it in the show notes. There's in the demo one called Maya and one called Miles, a male and a female. Yanev, I don't know if you've played with this thing, but this voice you can hear its lips smacking, you can hear it breathing, you can hear it like, let me have a think about that. It changes its tone, its tempo, its affect. It's the most incredible thing I've ever heard. Just stunning. And this demo is running in a browser, and it's just crazy. My wife and I spent half an hour just talking to it together, and my wife was asking it about how self-replication and when it was going to take over the world. And it was like gently, teasing and playing and being sarcastic and being curious and it was incredible. And I just don't know what to say about this except to say that we live in an age of miracles, and I just want everybody to go play with this thing. It's super fun. It's super fun.
We live in an age of creepy miracles. Yeah. I mean, the interesting question here is like, what's the application for this? Because obviously, hearing this thing breathe and stumble over itself, these are all, strictly speaking, inefficiencies, right, in communication. We talked just last week in React, Chris, about this gibber talk where we've got AIs talking to each other using an optimized for machines language. Now we're talking about really passing as humans. And I think there are some interesting use cases. My question is actually, how broad are the use cases where we say we want this AI voice to not just be natural and quick and low latency, but to actually pass as human? I think definitely, AI psychologists, AI, romantic companions and things like that are definitely cases where you really want to have that kind of human conversational style. But yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like, why not? But given the state of the art, like you said, of, the OpenAI voice mode and so on, do we actually, for most users, need it to be even more realistic? Does it actually help with all that much?
Well, so let me say a few things on that. Number one, they call this demo crossing the uncanny valley of conversational voice. And it does.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. And I don't know what reasoning model is sitting underneath it in terms of generating the text, the script of what it's saying. But I can tell you that I found myself responding to it in a way that was more visceral and emotional than ChatGPT. And I know, I'm almost certain it's not as clever as ChatGPT, and it's not as, well read, or, it hasn't got as deep reasoning. But I found myself emotionally interested in it, and it kind of shocked me how much. It reminded me of VR, where there was this saying that went around where it's just like, when you play video games, you're sort of suspending disbelief and trying to convince yourself you're in the world.
Yeah.
And when you use VR, you have to convince yourself you're not in a virtual world. You have to remind yourself you're not standing on the ledge of a high rise. Because it just fools all your senses. And here you have to continue to convince yourself. And I don't think it's as smart as GPT-4o or o1, but you can convince yourself you're not talking to a human being or a consciousness. And it is freaky. What's the use case? I continue to believe that ultimately, and I feel somewhat inevitably, most people, most of the time, are going to be speaking to one personal AI. It is going to be their friend and colleague. I don't personally believe there's going to be like a lawyer AI and a designer AI and a whatever AI. I think what that personal AI is going to be your preferred interface to the world, your intermediary to the world. Behind the scenes, it might be using specialist design agents and specialist booking agents and specialist whatever agents. I just don't think you're going to want to futz around with all of those personalities and characteristics and quirks.
Yeah.
And I think the person who wins that model, who wins that interface, that distribution, and who wins the voice and the tech that is powering that personal AI, boy, oh boy, and maybe there's like, it's not winner take all, it's winner take most, and there's 2 or 3 of them. The economic value that accrues to them is near infinite. I mean, you pour as much money as you want into that, winning that game.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the voice is one component, like you said. Well, let me share my personal experience, Chris, working with these tools, right? Whether it's the advanced voice on ChatGPT, whether it's Bordy Boardman, the AI agent that onboards you by phone for introductions. We talked about this a few weeks ago. The voice piece is relatively small, at least as far as I perceive it. The things that still feel like they're in the uncanny valley for me are more the underlying model aspects. In particular, number one, latency, right? That sort of conversational sense of like, OpenAI advanced voice, like, yes, you can interrupt it, but it's really bad at being interrupted. It's like interrupting on a really laggy video call, right? So there's that. And then there's also just like, how does it actually talk? And, too much like, I think this is sort of like, what's its system prompt? But my experience with a lot of these tools is that they talk like kind of obnoxious twats, and it's just kind of, they talk like an irritating person. So it's not even so much that they're not, that they're in the uncanny valley, so much as I just don't really want to talk to them because they're annoying. And, there's various other things like, I feel advanced voice still too much like talks and bullet points as if it's just a ChatGPT text session. So there are all of these things. And my point is, none of those are to do with the voice synthesis. All of them are in the back end. So maybe what this tool solves is also there. But I'm like, to me, the actual voice, the expression, or the text to speech has been good enough for a while. It's all the stuff that goes behind that. to make a truly conversational AI that's kind of been missing.
Yeah, the latency thing, feels close to solved with the Sesame model. The question of whether what it's saying is interesting and insightful, again, I don't know what's powering the script behind what it's saying. I haven't figured that out yet, but that felt more human. And as I said in a previous episode, I'm sort of convinced that ChatGPT has some sort of system message or fine tuning that's almost forced it to be more robotic. It's like it has this real subservient, overly eager tendency to like keep prompting and keep over explaining.
Yeah.
Sam Altman has explicitly said multiple times that 4.5 feels the most human and most natural of the models, and it is a little less eager. And I think that's not just the size of the model, the sophistication of the model. I think it's actually the way they've refined it. And so I don't think this is necessarily the nature of LLMs, Yaniv. I think it's the nature of they're trying to make them more of service. I think it's easy, possibly, to ask them to behave differently, to more human, less deferential. And I'm curious who's going to get that tone right. I've asked my ChatGPT to act, more like Samantha, actually, like a little witty, a little casual, a little sarcastic. And I've asked it multiple times, multiple times, stop prompting me at the end of every message. Like, stop ending every message with, what do you think? Or how can I be helpful? Or tell me, like, stop it. And it literally 4 or 5 times in a row would keep doing it. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll try not to do that anymore. Is there anything else you'd like to chat about? And I'm like, stop asking to keep the conversation going. Stop it. And it took about 4 or 5 times for it to actually stop. And it only stopped in that session.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fine tuning problem, not an inherent LLM problem.
Well, actually, I wonder if it's a business problem. And what I mean by that is I think it's quite an issue with larger companies with more to lose. They're more worried about I guess you'd call it the safety, but not in the sort of broad AI safety way, but more like not saying offensive things, not teaching you how to make bombs, not like, encouraging people to commit suicide, which has happened, like all these horrible things, right? If you're OpenAI, if you're Google, if you're anyone like that, you take that shit really seriously and you put a lot of guardrails around your AI. And I would suspect that as a result of putting all of those guardrails in, you are making it seem less human. If you're an early stage startup, for better and worse, because, like I said, there was that case of character AI, and AI basically encouraging a young man to commit suicide, which he did, which I think is just horrific. But the reality is there is less scrutiny. The incentive structure is different. If you're a small, scrappy startup, you can take a few more risks, right? And probably as a result of that, it is easier to make an AI that seems human. And the interesting question is, once you start putting those guardrails in place, are you going to lose some of that magic?
All right, those were our thoughts on this incredible new Sesame model that makes it sound like Samantha is whispering in our ears. What do you guys think about these next generation of voice models? Have they crossed the uncanny valley? Is it super interesting, or ultimately, do they all still sound like robots? Join us in the comments below, and we'll join you down there. For our final topic, let's talk about the impact of all of this AI stuff. Anthropic has just dropped data on AI and jobs, and they've tried to summarize some of the economic impact so far and what is predicted in the future. Here are some highlights. I'm reading here from a post from Ivan Landa Basso, partner at JME VC on LinkedIn. We'll try to link to this post as well. He says that the key takeaways here are that these are the jobs that AI is going after first. According to this, 37% of respondents said that it was being used for software development, coding, debugging workflows. 10% of respondents said it was being used for writing and content, for editing, copywriting. 5.9% said they were using it for business and finance, so research and analytics type stuff, or analysis type stuff rather. And physical labor jobs, it's currently almost untouched. They're not reporting any usage at all. For automation and augmentation, they say 57% of AI has been used. They're using it for augmentation, to iterate, validate, learn. 43% said they're using it for automation, to fully replace tasks like formatting and summarizing, debugging. And only 4% of jobs say that they're using AI for 75% or plus of tasks, to fully automate a job away. Only 4%. This Anthropic study is sort of showing it's making serious gains into disrupting the labor force, into making real changes in the way people do their work. But so far, the idea that you fully replace a job or fully replace a task is still, in the low digits. 43% saying automation, 4% saying replacing a whole job. It's early days.
It's early days, but that's already pretty significant. So I guess I've got a few reflections on this. So first of all, coding is by far the place where the augmentation is happening the most. We've talked in the past couple of Reacts episodes about how quickly this is happening, and that, everyone I talk to in software development is part of that 37%, I guess, is using AI actively or figuring out how to use it. Now, there are two possible factors explaining this, and the reality is probably a combination of both. One is that AI is particularly well suited to writing code. It's really good at it. So I think that's one reason. I think the other reason is that software engineers, by definition, are people who are very technical, very comfortable using new software, and therefore probably more likely to put the effort in and to have the interest in adopting AI in their daily work. So I think, that it makes it a natural ground zero for this disruption, and we see that disruption happening. And then the question is, of course, Chris, how much does it ripple out from there into other sorts of jobs?
There's a classic startup axiom, right, which is solve your own problems. And so
Right.
if you're an engineer looking to build a startup, what problem are you going to solve? Building a startup, writing code, right? And so what do engineers know more intimately than engineering?
That's right. And then there's another startup axiom, which is the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? And so I think, definitely the AI future is kind of here for software development. Or at least it's coming very, very quickly. The question is, to what extent is that because the models are particularly good at AI? The most cynical take, which I have seen on LinkedIn, is, it turns out that the only thing that LLMs are really actually that good at is coding. So that's great, but, that's pretty much the limit of where it's going to have impact. I think that is too cynical by quite a great degree, but I think it's true that the other use cases are more difficult, both because of the nature of the tasks and the nature of the people who are currently performing those tasks, being less technical, less interested in this sort of automation. But what I'm seeing as well at a lot of companies that I'm in touch with is that this desire to use AI to automate tasks is spreading well beyond the software engineering team, and real resources are being put into figuring out how existing human-operated tasks can be automated or augmented by AI. So this is really happening. Sam Altman, I think we mentioned this on the podcast a few months ago, Chris. He said something about, when he was interviewed about, is AI going to replace jobs? And he gave this somewhat diplomatic answer, but I think it's also true, which is he said that AI is going to replace tasks. And one way to think of a job that a human does is as a bundle of tasks that human is responsible for. So it's not that AI is going to come in and take away that entire job, but it's going to look at that bundle of tasks and say, these are the tasks that can be automated. And so that job has then fewer tasks that are owned by a human, and then perhaps the human can therefore have a greater span of control and more impact because they've automated away a number of their tasks that they've done. And that's no different, Chris, really, from like what spreadsheets did and various technological waves, things you used to have to do as part of your job that now technology does for you. And I think that is the way that AI is going to make its way into the world. There are going to be headlines on both sides about how AI means that this company X is doing massive layoffs and company Y is doing massive layoffs. That might occasionally be true. I feel that is more often a story that is told for shareholders and whatnot to make the company layoffs, to give it a more savory reason than, we're just cost cutting and business isn't that good. But absolutely, human productivity, if this is done properly, is going to massively be increased, which is what technology does. And I think that is what it's going to do to jobs, is it's going to replace tasks, just as Sam Altman said.
Yeah, at the time we spoke about that, and I thought that was a really interesting way of describing a product strategy, which is, you don't want to boil the ocean and try to replace a whole human being. You want to peel away use cases. You want to peel away jobs to be done. Literally, that's a product management, right, term. It's a turn of phrase. And so, yeah, it's going to, by definition, solve for a job to be done, a task at a time, until, guess what? All of a sudden, it can do 99.9% of the tasks of a full person in a full role. It is worth pointing out the other thing that Mark Zuckerberg said, which I thought was also I thought it was pretty profound. where he said, we sort of conflate intelligence in this big ball of stuff, and we just think, hey, if this thing can reason, well, then it's intelligent, and if it's intelligent, then it's going to replace a human being. And he said, intelligence could be maybe roughly broken down into three things: reasoning, consciousness, and will. And he's like, all we're really creating at the moment is reasoning. There is no consciousness, and it has no will. And will it never have consciousness, and will it never have will? I don't know, and I don't think he was commenting on that. But those are very different things, and you might expect or hope that a person in a role is not just reasoning all day. They have some level of consciousness in terms of what other humans want and what intent they might have, and they have some kind of will that they're trying to express in the world. Now, the cynic might argue, yeah, but it's probably just, you could boil that down to the will of the CEO and the few of the executive teams. And as Ben Parr said on our show many episodes ago, you probably can build $1 billion company with 3 people, because all you're really doing is expressing their will, just down the chain. And if the AIs can kind of scale someone's will and consciousness, then why do you need that in the rest of the workforce? We'll see. It's going to take time certainly to replace whole human beings. That point that was about it affecting labor, that basically 0%, that's going to change, right? So autonomous vehicles will replace drivers. More and more factory work is actually being done by robots, and will increasingly be done by autonomous humanoid robots. We're already seeing that thanks to Figure and others, and obviously Amazon and so on. So I don't think any job is safe. I think it's gonna come for everyone to one degree or another.
Well, to one degree or another. And, that's the point, Chris, is automation, ever since the Industrial Revolution, and arguably before, automation has come for jobs, right? That today's factory worker does a very different set of tasks than the factory worker from 100 years ago. Today's farmer does a very different set of tasks and is way, way more productive, has way, way more leverage on their labor than a farmer from 200 years ago. It is a different job. And frankly, there are far fewer farmers today than there used to be because of automation. And so you can say, yes, a lot of jobs have gone away or have become obsolete or become much smaller in terms of the size of the labor force required to do that job. It's not a new story, right? I think that's the point. It is interesting. There could be a difference of degree. This could happen faster. The impact could be larger. I think the jury's still out on that. It could just be the case that this is the next wave of productivity enhancement. We already had the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the technology information revolution. Then we have the AI revolution. Each of these steps has increased productivity and overall increased human prosperity. And I don't want to put my head in the sand and say that the world is perfect and that, increasing human prosperity is all we should be going for. But there is no doubt the technology has been very powerful at doing that and has not resulted in mass unemployment, despite frequent calls of doom whenever a new automation technology comes into play.
Yeah, look, I don't want to belabor this particular point because we've spoken, I think, about this and to death on 3 previous shows. But I do think that the rate, the scale, and the nature of this is different because generalized humanoid robots can do generalized human work and can do it all day. And so, I do think this has a different texture to it. But yeah, only time will tell.
Only time will tell. So what do you think? Is AI coming for your job, or is this just a giant load of hype? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments.
Well, that was today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Yaniv, how can people find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn, where I try to make it a bit less boring and share a bunch of thoughts on technology, leadership, politics, and all sorts of other stuff. So send me a connection request. Let me know you're from TSV. We've got a few already in the past week who've connected with me. I love to hear from listeners, so I will accept your request. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I'm gone viral on LinkedIn the last few posts for some reason. People think that I'm trolling, but
the shadow ban has finally been lifted, mate.
I think it actually has. It's kind of funny how binary it is. You can really see those things take into effect. So yeah, follow me there on LinkedIn at Chris Sard, or all social media at Chris Sard, and on my newsletter, chrissard.com/newsletter. Other than that, we'll catch you in the next one. Great to chat, Yaniv.
As always, Chris, lots of fun. Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money. while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies already use Vanta. Why don't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.